Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another in the ongoing Rallyware webinar series. And today we are fortunate to have a longtime friend and colleague across the direct selling industry, Brett Duncan, with us. So before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. Everyone who is attendance, everyone who signed up, you will be receiving a copy of the recording. So just so that you know that. And then also, once Brett is done with his presentation, we are going to ask him a few questions, and hopefully you will help me out with those questions that you can put in the Q&A area of the webinar. So that's how we're going to proceed. And Brett, thanks so much for being with us this afternoon. I'm glad you could spare the time and your expertise with us.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
No, yeah, you've got me, right? You can hear me, huh?
I can hear you perfectly. And just to give everybody a background who may not be familiar with you, you know, you and I have known each other for many, many years. But I did a little research and I found a term that I had never associated with you before, but it is a very apt and fitting term. So I saw the other day that you had labeled yourself as a transitionist. And so that's, so Brett's somebody who specializes in helping direct selling companies as they transition into the new era of direct selling. For those of you who know him or may not know him, he is also co-founder, managing partner of Strategic Choice Partners. That's a business development firm that helps direct selling companies take their next step. So Brett, thanks so much again for being with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
No, well, thank you, Rich. And it's that term transitionist, which can have all kinds of implications these days. But I'll tell you, it's a funny story kind of where that came from for me, at least. And that was, you hear all these presentations from futurists, right? You hear that used a lot. Hey, what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now? And I'm always fascinated by those presentations. And I also recognize that, the benefit those people have is probably 10, 20 years from now, we won't know how to get in contact with them and won't be able to hold them accountable on whether they were right or not. But what I realized was I'm not great at that. What I do feel like people, reach out to me the most for is, hey, how do we get from this area where we are to at least our next few steps? So it's not so far in the future, but a lot of times what direct sales companies are really needing, and any company for that matter, is, hey, how do we progress? And so that's where I see a lot of the work that I do and even our firm, SCP. And so anyway, happy to be here. And like you said, our paths have crossed so many times over the years. It's awesome. And you are truly one of the good guys. So I'm glad to be here. The funny thing is I'm talking about resolutions today. Which almost has a little bit of a futuristic feel to it. But I would say, this is focused more on 2022. And what I want to say before we get into these, one, I've got 7 resolutions that I would love to see every direct selling company make this year. And this is something fun I tend to do every year. But some rules around it. One, 7 isn't everything, right? So there's going to be something on here that some of you feel like, oh, well, every company ought to do this too. And you might be right about that. So I'm not intending for this to be comprehensive. 2, I think we have to remember what a resolution really is. And it's rooted in that word resolve. And that is different to me. A lot of times people confuse resolutions and goals and mission and vision, and all of those things are important. But to me, a resolution, I like to think of it a little bit differently. What am I going to have the resolve? What am I going to make sure, come hell or high water, that I do this year, right? Or don't do. And so what I'm going to share with everyone are some things that I see come up a lot with my clients. I've been in the industry since 2002. I worked on the corporate side at Advocare, and then I worked at the corporate side for Manatech. And then I've been in the consulting space since 2014. And my roots are in marketing. I find myself these days doing just as much work on comp plan design and customer program design and strategy. And then we have a team that helps all kinds of people as well. So that's the clients that come in. What I'm sharing with you are resolutions as I'm in my calls and meetings with them. I'm like, man, I would really love to see you do this. this year, and it comes up over and over again. So all that to say, enough preamble. Are you ready, Rich? He was ready.
I am ready, Brett.
Okay. All right. Well, here we go. Well, I had Rich and I got together recently and took a picture. That's Rich on the right. But my first point here is stop comparing yourself to other direct sales companies. Now, let that sink in for just a minute. Stop comparing yourself to other direct selling companies. That might sound counterintuitive, and probably to a certain degree it is. But, especially over the last year or so, what I have seen is a lot of great companies who are reading all the press and all the amazing stories of all the different companies that just took off during the pandemic. And they're sitting there and looking at their own situation, and that didn't happen for them. Maybe they only grew a little, or they stalled out. A lot of companies were on a decline. And what I've seen, and it's heartbreaking, is they feel like, well, if I'm not growing like that, I must really be a failure. I must really be falling short. If I'm not seeing hockey stick growth like I keep reading about, or like I keep seeing presentations about, then it's worse than I thought it was. We're really off here. And what I want to tell you is I've heard so much from these companies, and, they don't hear the stories of the companies like them. They don't know that they are probably more common in our industry than the others. And that doesn't, I think you're going to see it all over the board. So there's companies that are growing. There's companies that aren't growing. By the way, that you could probably say that just about any time in our history, right? And so what I want to encourage everyone, though, is because that's been so front and center, try to give yourself a little grace and know when and how you should be looking at other direct sales companies and what to do with that, okay? There are lots of companies who've struggled since 2020. All right. You're not alone if you found yourself in that place. So what I want to do, that doesn't mean you settle for it. But what I have seen is a lot of people lose hope that there's anything they could do about, because they think all the other companies are just taking off and they're the only ones that are really struggling right now. I'll also tell you, many companies that surged in 2020 have come back down to earth. And that's something too. Our industry is, the word I always use for it is volatile. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it in kind of the way financial analysts look at the market. But if direct selling is an extremely volatile industry, the highs are very high and the lows can be very low. And as much as so many of us would love to just say, man, I would take 10% year over year growth every single year if I could get it. That sounds awesome and it's great. But our channel, our way of doing business leverages momentum like no other channel does. And so while that's amazing and there's all kinds of benefits that come from that, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, we also have to recognize we are, to a certain degree, a slave to momentum or the lack of momentum. And so part of us on the corporate side, part of our responsibility is to plan for it one way or the other. Okay. And so what that means is you need to define what success should look like for you. Now, all of you have heard that statement before, but it really is important. I've seen companies who, sit there and they have a great, awesome, profitable company at 15 million a year. And everything is great until they go see another company that's 50 million. And so they feel like, we're not successful. That's where we're supposed to be. What they don't know a lot of times is that company at 50 million is not profitable. And that company at 50 million is not enjoying the work that they're doing there. And so we have to define, what does success look like for us? And I can promise you, if you can focus on that, then, things will come up, et cetera, et cetera. But, it will put everyone else and all the other companies in the right place in terms of your perspective. So we definitely need to learn from what other companies are doing, but I would say let's not compare, especially in an unhealthy way. Let's also make sure you understand that, hey, that tactic, that strategy worked for that company. That doesn't automatically mean it's going to work for me. Our industry is quite the industry of copycats. And sometimes in a bad way. So, a lot of times at the end of the day, direct sales companies, we are great at creating culture. And that, I think at the end of the day, that's what we share. And your culture is going to dictate what will work for you as a company. We've had companies this last year who have leaned in more into traditional party plan, believe it or not. And we've had tons of other companies that did that before that can't get it to work anymore. And so, there's shifting and pivoting and all of those words that we've used over the last couple of years. So you've got to first look at your context before you look at everyone else's context, because their context might not apply to you. Okay. The only other thing I would add here too is, especially in going back into this kind of, there are lots of companies that surged in 2020 and are coming back down to earth. Many of those companies, they felt like, gosh, we've got to keep up with this growth. And they also thought, well, man, if we're doing this now, it's only going to continue. And like I said, direct selling is a volatile channel. So it is the exception, not the rule, that when growth begins, that it continues. Okay. So I think the smart and wise thing for any executive to do is to say, okay, how do we leverage and catch the wind of growth now? But also, how do we make sure we don't, for example, hire up too fast or over-resource things, assuming that this growth is only going to continue? Because as much as we think we can make that happen, and maybe you can, all of the signs, if you look at our industry, will tell you, no, probably within 18 months, 2 years, 3 years max, you're definitely going to trail off. And then you'll go through another round and you'll go through another round. And that's really what our industry looks like. So anyway, that's the first one. And I camped out there a while because I know there are people listening right now that just hearing that alone gives you hope and gives you some strength for looking forward. So define what success looks like for you, learn from other companies, but don't compare. Make sense to you, Rich?
I really like that. Define what success looks like to you, because that helps me prioritize. That helps me, set strategy. And that's the lens everybody, I think, should be looking through.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point too. It kind of prompted a thought. If you're not the one defining what success looks like for your company, then who or what is? And a lot of times we're letting what other companies are doing and the half-baked stories we're hearing about what they're doing, that becomes how we define success. And it shouldn't, right? Well, let's keep going. That's our first resolution. Here's my second one for everyone. And I got to tell you, I think I have this resolution for everyone every single year. It doesn't go away because companies still are not prioritizing their investment in their tech development like they need to. Okay. Now then, this can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but here's what I mean when I say tech development. So everything you do as a direct sales company requires development. Okay. It requires someone to go in and touch some code or do something. It might be very minor. It might not look like code or whatever, but because if it's a CMS on the whatever. Okay. But think about this for a second. If you're going to make a promotion, it takes a little bit of development, right? If you're going to change a comp plan, that takes development. If you are going to change your payment processing or shipping or rank advancements or whatever it is, if you're an executive, you have these ideas, everyone gets excited about it, and then you take it to your development team, and more times than not, they will tell you why that can't happen right away, why that will take place. It'll take 6 months to do it, whatever it is. And I'm not saying those aren't good reasons. I think their reasons are legit. The real issue is if you don't recognize that everything you do requires development, then you will never properly prioritize development. Okay. You need to budget whatever it takes. If you find your company constantly sitting there saying, well, we'd like to do that, but we can't. Our IT team's not able to pull it off. Our resources aren't able to do it. We don't have the bandwidth from a development standpoint. We've already got other priorities in front of that. Whatever it is, that is a red flag for you to look and say, are we actually investing in development like we should? And a lot of times this development, it might be a third party. It might be an actual person. I've seen companies that they go out and they hire, an $80,000, $100,000 a year developer, and it opens up the floodgates for them in terms of what they're able to produce. And if you're a 10, 15, 20, 100, 200, I've talked to $200, $300 million companies that are scared to take that step. But if you do the math, if that actually opens things up, that's one of the greatest investments you can make. Okay. So budget whatever it takes to have the proper development in place. The other thing you have to think about are the opportunity costs. Okay. What would be more important than you having a system that allows you to become what you want to become? If you feel like you are a slave to your system, whether it's the system itself, which by the way, it probably isn't, it's the fact that you don't have the development resources in place to do it quickly or to do it right. Okay. What could be more important than that? Because I promise you, if you're anything like my experience and anything like my client's experience, you are constantly saying, boy, this is what we would love to do. This is what we know is the right step for us, but it's going to take us forever, or we're going to have some big meeting about prioritization. Those things won't go away, but I will tell you, if you are backed up on what you're doing on that front, I would tell you, you need to invest more. Your business is yelling at you saying you need to invest more in this area. And here's, the other part of that is make the move. If you need to hire someone, hire someone. If you need to contract someone, do it. If you need to get a third party, whatever. There are so many different flexible things that you can do there. But whatever it is, do it. And I will tell you, going back up to the budget, even at the expense of other areas, I'm not sitting here. I know it is we love our people that work for us, right? But you've got to look as a business, you have to look and say, what's the best use of my budget? And if that means I need to pull from other areas, then that's great. Okay. Make the move. Do what your business says you have to do. It's a tough decision, but without a doubt, people are waiting to see that happen. All right. Okay. Rich, I know over your career, you've seen plenty of this, right? So, what else would you add to that?
No, you've got it spot on. The thing I didn't think of is your very first bullet point there. The examples you gave, yes, we have a new incentive. Yes, we have a new credit card processor, changes to the comp plan. But I was thinking something as regular as what every company does in rolling out a new product line, multiple times a year. Just think of all the places that touches systems from internal to external. So you're exactly right. With everything we do in the business requires some kind of technology.
Yep, without a doubt. And that takes me into my next point. They're kind of point one and point two of this, but get flexible tech like the rest of the world. So not only do we need to invest properly, but we also need to recognize just how agile and flexible the rest of the world is. And this resolution, I got to tell you, this one is just as much for our supplier colleagues, our vendor colleagues in the software space as it is for our companies. Okay. And here's what I mean by that. And you kind of led us right into it. But I was talking to a company just a couple days ago, a client of mine, big company, large company, been around for years. And they were still telling me, they said, hey, to change this banner on this web page, I still have to submit a ticket. Now then, let me tell you guys something. In this day and age, on any website, if that is something you are having to do, something is wrong. Okay. You cannot accept that. Okay. And I know it exists. And so again, I know some of my supplier buddies are probably cringing right now, and I'm not trying to make that happen. I'm trying to say, guys, we've got to all step up. As companies, we can't accept that anymore because our businesses move too fast. For me not to be able to promote on my website what needs to be promoted right now and to submit a ticket and wait the 24, 48, 72 hours it takes to make that happen. When it comes to promotional things like that, hey, the time might have already changed. Okay. So we have to get flexible. And I got to tell you, the rest of the world, Shopify and WordPress and WooCommerce, they're not the only platforms, but there are so many companies, e-commerce companies out there outside of direct sales that lean on these platforms. And when you're exposed to that and when you're aware of it and you look at it and you know how not so rigid those platforms are, it gets very frustrating when you are in a situation where you can't be that agile. And so that's what we are comparing ourselves against. Our customers don't really know the difference between a direct sales company and any other e-commerce company. They don't know and couldn't care less, by the way, about all the stuff we have to track for commissions and all of that. They want to shop, and they're used to shopping on platforms that allow for all this stuff to happen. And they are used to shopping. And again, they don't know what the platform is, but they're used to shopping on a platform that can pretty quickly be updated and be flexible. So this is really our call. We need to get to this point. And again, I think a lot of our software platforms are doing that, but I think we got to get there faster. And so I would encourage our platforms, and I would encourage our companies to get there. It's ridiculous for any company to feel like it's your technology that's holding you back. If you feel that way, something's wrong, because technology by its very means is to actually help you do more, help you accomplish more. Okay. So if that's you, know it. The other thing I would bring up is I don't think we will ever outpace the world of plugins and integrations. One of the things, I've got an iPhone, I'm sure many people do. And if you remember when they first came out, they had the campaign of, hey, there's an app for that, right? And the brilliant thing there was Apple didn't worry about building all of that stuff. They just opened up their platform to let thousands upon thousands upon thousands of other developers do that stuff. And it made their product cool. The same thing happens with Shopify. The same thing happens with WordPress and WooCommerce. The same thing happens with other platforms. And so we're constantly going to be up against that. I would even get crazy for some of our suppliers and say, hey, is the future for you possibly being you're going to create some killer integrations or plugins that work on these platforms? So rather than being the platform, maybe you become the great plugin that everyone wants to use. I don't know, but I just see that. I work enough on, and our team works enough on sites outside of that, and we use these platforms a lot, that we just see, man, they're so flexible and they're so fast. Wouldn't that be great if we could also do that for all of our clients? The other thing I'll say is technology always requires an investment, one way or the other. And so make sure you're investing on the right side. And here's what I mean by that. Once you weigh your options, and I definitely think you should definitely reach out. We have so many great software suppliers in our space that offer that core back office kind of system. Definitely go through that, and then try to understand, well, because I haven't found one yet that does everything that a company wants. Usually it gets you 80 to 90% there. And then there's something special about your company that requires just a little bit of customization. Sometimes it might take a little bit more. And sometimes you shy away from that because that's an extra investment. On the flip side, maybe an investment should be made on, if I thought about this differently? What if I said, I'm going to pick one of these super flexible platforms, but then maybe the investment goes into how do I make that work for a direct sales company? I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm saying as a company, that's how you should be thinking. Okay. And do not let your technology be what you at least feel like is holding you back. Okay. Do whatever you got to do to get it there. So don't just, the second resolution was get the development in place. The third resolution is make sure your system can handle it and can be updated quickly, because otherwise the world is moving. The world couldn't care less about whatever platform you're on. It's not going to wait for you to figure that out. All right. It's going to keep moving. All right. So anyway, and again, Rich, I know you've spent your career, or at least a large part of your career in this space, and you see it all the time. So hopefully I'm not stepping on too many toes. I'm hoping it's
no, I don't think you're stepping on any toes. It's as I look at that very last statement, right? Make sure your investment is made in the right area. All I have to do is chuckle, because how do you make sure, right? It's like the next shiny object in the room is always coming out the door. So, as you've said in prior points, it's all about, you're not buying technology for technology's sake. You are what is going to benefit the business, and how can we show what it's doing in the business. So that more than anything probably is the number one criteria on how you're going to figure out, which one is the investment in the right area.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you've seen it a ton where people come in and they don't even know where to start, right? Well, I don't even know what we need. And I get that's to a certain degree, I understand that, right? It's like, hey, I'm not an expert in this area, but part of your responsibility as a corporate executive is understanding, hey, here's the core business needs that we have, and doing your research. So anyway, good stuff. All right. I'm going to keep rolling. I think I scrolled ahead a little soon there. Here's my fourth one: track data that makes an impact. I will say this. I think our industry and the companies within our channel have gotten so much better at how they track data. It varies across the board. We help some companies with this as well and kind of create what I call a KPI culture. But what I would now say, a lot of companies are tracking data. Not as many companies are tracking the data that is actually actionable. Okay. And so there's a difference there, right? On the one hand, it's like looking on the back of a baseball card. Hey, look at all those stats. Isn't that awesome? The other side of it is, oh, look at what's happening here. Look at what this is telling me we should do. Let's go do something about that. Okay. So just this last week, I had the opportunity to post an article on World of Direct Selling, which is one of our great newsletters in our space. And I talked about 3 key reports, 3 stats that direct selling companies should pay more attention to. So I'm not going to go into detail on those here. I would encourage you to check out that article, but I will summarize it. Okay. The first one that I've seen happen that has such an impact on customers is a customer segmentation report. As a matter of fact, and this has to do with purchasing behaviors. And what I want to know is over the last 12 months of all the customers who have ordered from me, how many of them ordered only once? How many of them ordered 2 or 3 times? How many of them ordered 4 to 6 times? How many of them ordered 7 to 10 times? How many more than that? Because as you can probably guess, the people who order 7 or more times in a year, they are a way different person, at least in how they relate to our company, than the customer who has ordered only once. Okay. That one that's only ordered once, for all we know, they just felt pressure, from a friend. I'm not saying the friend pressured them, but they just felt reciprocity, right? My friend's asking me to buy this, so I'll buy it. And that's fine, but they obviously have had no intent of coming back and purchasing. What happens? So many companies right now are looking at customer programs, customer acquisition. How do I make customers more productive? Well, until you know this data, you won't really know where you need to be aiming. Okay. Because I think a lot of time, and let me tell you this, every one of these that I have seen, the best I've seen is that about 55% of a company's customers order only once in a year. I've seen it as high as 85%. Okay. So if you don't know that mix, go run that report, read the article. I'll go into more detail there, but it will unveil for you where your guns need to be pointed when it comes to customer promotions. Okay. Similar to that would be distributor segmentation. And what I want to know from that is not just their buying habits, but also their, what I would call acquisition. Okay. Well, a lot of times we might call recruiting or sponsoring, but I widen it because I want to know of my distributors who I have, how many of them, how much are they personally buying? But then more importantly, how many customers are they bringing in? How many have brought in 0 to 1? How many 2 to 4? I do a somewhat similar range, right? And then also, how many other distributors have they brought in? Have they sponsored? Get an idea on that because, again, when you know that, it's going to help shine a light on how do we move the masses. A lot of the attention that we give to our sales programs and things like that, a lot of times only resonates with about 30% of your distributor base. Now, I'm not saying you should ignore them. I'm not saying you should stop that. But you also need to recognize you're putting stuff out there that is just white noise for 70% of your bunch. So what if you could get that 70% to take one more step, right? Not the 10, not all 10 that you have in your success system. What if they could just take one more step in that? It would mean so much for your company. So get a handle on that. And then that leads into fast start analysis. And what I would say is, in almost every company has a fast start program. Make sure you have a report that shows you, here's what the value and the productivity and the activity of my new distributors are during my fast start program. So if you have a 90-day program, what do they do in those 90 days? And then what do they do their first year? And what I want to know there is if they reached tier 2 of my fast start program, what does that typically mean they will do for the entire year? If they get to all 3 points of my fast start program, what does that do? Because when I have that information, I'm able to then make some decisions on how to either change my fast start program or invest in their development. All right. And then finally, I'll add one. This was my mentor and co-founder who passed away this last year, but Alan Luce. He would always say that if he could only track one KPI, it would be paid as levels. He felt like, and I think there's a lot of truth to what he said. If you look at are your distributors who have reached a level, and is their paid as level? How many distributors are falling short of their recognized level with their paid as level, or how many are over that? And so both ways. And so in other words, are they actually acting like and producing at the level that their recognition and their highest achieved level says that they will? And that's obviously a great forward-looking indicator of where your business is, because again, that covers pretty much everything that your business does. All right. So, Rich, what do you think? There's a lot there.
It is. Well, and I was fortunate enough to see that World of Direct Selling article on Monday and got a chance to comb through that. And what I found very fascinating is that I really love the term you use in acquisition, right? And because to me, it is all about that customer acquisition. Because if we can get them bringing on enough customers through the door, some of those customers will eventually become those distributors, right?
Sure.
So we don't have to focus on bringing bodies into the business on my team. I really think that happens naturally as you focus and emphasize customer acquisition.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right, I'm going to go a little faster here. I've ranted a bit too much. I'm going to try to make up some time. Yeah. Rethink onboarding. So again, we were talking about fast start. I think that goes right into onboarding. Here's a question I have for you. What if 90 days is all we have? Now, Rich, I'm starting to get into Rallyware space. I can't imagine the amount of data that you guys have here on what this looks like. But, we talk a lot about a distributor's first 90 days. But I will tell you, if you look at the data, if you pull those reports that I just told you to pull, you might see that a large part of your distributors, 90 days is all you're getting. And while I know many of us would sit here and say, well, we got to stop that. We got to get them to last longer. And we want to try to do that. But if we switch how we think, and if we account for what's going on in our space, one of the reasons that might be happening is because people are doing multiple gigs. I've gotten my hands here, social selling news from, I think it's this month. And our friend John Fleming was just sharing just over the last year. Where did it go? So gig workers went from, I think last year or whatever the first year they did it, says 55% of them the first year said they do multiple gigs. The year after, just over a year, it jumped up to 69%. 69% of gig workers have more than one gig. Okay. Well, what does that say for us? We have to assume that people coming in as distributors in our business have multiple gigs. That's what that data tells us. It might not be exactly the same percentage, but I got to tell you, it would be unwise to think that that's not the case. And so they have divided focus in their lives. That's just where it is at. And rather than try to talk them out of that, maybe we need to accept it and update how we onboard them so that it resonates with them. Okay. What if we could help the masses take that next step? And how would you change your onboarding program if you thought 90 days was all you had? Again, I'm not saying we need to accept that, but yet if I look at that and say, 90 days is it, I bet you would change how you engage with the distributor in their first 90 days, So anyway, Rich, any thoughts there?
Yeah, big one there. Thinking more and more as you read John's book and the additional articles that come out with the additional research they've done. I'm telling you, I will challenge my peers, colleagues across the industry that we have got to make it as easy as those other, gig opportunities that we hold up there and compare ourselves against. So What I mean by that is how easy it is for them to sign up. How easy is it for them to leave, but then come back through the door again? Remember, in the old days, the old guy here, we used to say, if you didn't stay for so long, or once you left after a certain amount of time period, we're going to make you jump a major hurdle to come back into the business. What if all that I need is October, November, and December of every year to buy more holiday gifts? I need a couple extra $100 each of those months. Can they do that in your program today?
No, that's great. Well, and again, I'm looking, by the way, if for those listening, if you haven't been to John's site, Ultimate Gig Resources, do it. And of course, the book is great. I'm looking here at that article too, just real quickly. He's saying gig workers that they surveyed in October of this last year, 71% of them work less than 8 hours a week on their gig. 84% of them work less than 4 days a week. 71% of them expect to earn less than $500. And yet 81% of them have a positive experience. So again, if that's not resetting how we're thinking about things, I think it should. Our distributors should be segmented as well in how we treat them. All right, let's keep going. I'm almost done. This one, I bet you're tired of hearing about, but we have got to take the regulatory changes much more seriously and much more proactively. I am shocked when I talk to companies at how much they are brushing off what's going on. And I'm not going to go into all those details now. Again, everyone here has probably seen a lot of it. But what I have seen is a lot of companies don't really think it applies to them. And they give me some of the craziest reasons for that. And let me tell you this, and there's people on the call right now that I think could attest to this, but the regulators aren't interested in reasoning with you. Okay. They aren't. Everything that I have heard from people who've gone through that experience said, don't fool yourself. Okay. So we've got to take it seriously. And I will tell you, your logic is ignored. Okay. You are responsible. And let me just give an example. I was talking to a company recently, and they have something in their comp plan that I think they should change. And they think they should change it for multiple reasons, but one is a regulatory reason. And they let me know that, hey, it's their IT system, going back to another resolution, but it's their IT system that doesn't allow them to update that. And I said, well, that's great. I said, but if FTC comes calling, they're not going to care about your IT company. Okay. It's on you. And so we've got to take more responsibility here as a company in an industry. Here's what I see happening a lot. We've got to be more focused on improving what we do than we are on protecting what we've done. Now then, that sounds like I'm saying, oh boy, we've done bad stuff. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is most of the time, the response that I hear from people is, well, this is just what we do. We've got to protect that. And I do think there's an element of protection that needs to be in place. And hear me out. I definitely think some of the regulatory things that are going on are vast overreach. Okay. But my next point says the game has changed and we aren't the referees. So the other part of this is the fact that it kind of doesn't matter what I think because I'm not in charge of the game. I play in the game, but I'm not in charge of how it works. I liken it, in recent years in football, they've put in all kinds of rules to protect the quarterback. And they're pretty silly rules because you've got this 250-pound linebacker coming in to try to take out the quarterback. But if that quarterback throws it and he ends up hitting him, you've got all this momentum and inertia in place. But if they hit him, it's a big time penalty. Okay. Now then, most of us watching, and especially the players, would say, well, that's just stupid. But it doesn't matter what the player thinks. If the player keeps doing that, they're just going to keep getting penalized. So we have to recognize that the game that we are playing in is not the ones that we're the referees. Should we fight in certain areas? Of course. But we also need to recognize, we talk all the time about game changers. Well, this has been a game changer. And we have got to recognize the rules of the game we're playing, or else we won't succeed at the game. And so I would urge everyone to be proactive. I know I talk to a lot of companies who feel like, all this stuff, there's no way all of it's going to change. And you're probably right. But I bet you some of it will. As a matter of fact, I think that's kind of the tactic. Throw the kitchen sink at the wall and whatever sticks, the regulators will take. So we've got to be more aggressive here and more proactive about how we are adjusting. And we have to be faster because the other thing that's going to happen is the regulators aren't going to say, oh, I see you have it planned for a 2025 rollout. They're going to be like, no. It should happen today. It should have actually happened 5 years ago. So we've got to be prepared for that. And we have to assume that something could happen. All right. Because that's another thing that companies are like, well, who's going to care about us? And you might be right, but boy, that's a big risk. Okay. Let me keep rolling here. And this is my last one. We got to double down on video. And we already, I think, probably feel like we've done that. So now we've got to double down again. Because here's the thing. We need quantity of video and we need quality. The entire internet runs on video. Think about when you log into social media, if it's Instagram or Facebook, TikTok, obviously, it's all video now. It's very rarely, just for me as a consumer, am I looking at just pictures or just words. It's a lot of times I'm expecting to see video. So we have to adapt to that. If you aren't publishing a video per day, you'll likely fall behind this year. Okay, let me say that again. If you aren't publishing a video per day, you will likely fall behind. Now, the good news is these don't have to all be like heavily produced, edited videos, right? These can be live streams. These can be stories. These can be reels, whatever. What I have is standard, right? What we're used to. You need all of those. But I think what you really need to look at is, hey, if we're not doing that, we will probably, I'm not saying you're behind now, but you probably will be before the year's done. If you aren't publishing 3 videos per week, you're already behind, period. Go compare yourselves to other brands, not direct selling brands, just other brands overall, and see what they're doing, especially the ones that you look up to, okay? And then the other thing I'll add here, Rich, is just you can't just push them out there. You actually have to nurture those videos. And what I mean by that is, how do I share them? How do I make sure they get more views? And a lot of times that's not your video producers or your editor's job. That's a completely different skill set. So make sure that you're accounting for that and you have a plan for it. So, Rich, took me a while and I apologize, but here are 7 resolutions for 22. Stop comparing yourself. Yeah.
And these resolutions, I might actually be able to keep 1 or 2, unlike the other resolutions I usually make at the beginning of the year, right?
That's
Although
right.
that doubling down on the video, if I were back inside a direct selling company, that would be very daunting, where you lay down that challenge of 1 video per day. So
yeah,
I will say that.
No, I know it even challenges me, but I think it's the reality.
So couple questions for you in the Q&A, and one very good comment in the chat. When you were talking about prioritizing your investment in tech development, you had the comment put in there, every day that you defer that investment, right? Because you don't want to spend the money, it probably costs you more than that in what you're losing in business, right? So I thought that's an excellent way to look at that.
Yeah, it is.
All righty. So two questions for you, and they both come back to your sort of data conversation. Okay. And I'm glad you referenced people to go to Hockey's periodical and take a look at that. But the first one is that you emphasize in that purchasing behavior that we're supposed to be tracking, that you also want to track, besides consumer purchasing behavior, you said you need to track distributor purchasing behavior, and they want to know why that's important.
Well, good question. One, I'd say where I would start with that is that's important because, hey, they're customers too. And I mean that not how they are set up in your system, but in how they like your product. So I want to know that, right? I want to know, hey, if a distributor comes in, this is what their buying behaviors normally are. Beyond that, I also want to get a grip on, and this is where it kind of relates to the second report. I want to understand how many of my distributors actually aren't distributors. So how many of them, they might have signed up to, and again, this is something I think from a regulatory standpoint, we want to try to get away from, but how many of them actually signed up just to get the best deal? How many signed up never with the intent of building a business? Again, they didn't do anything wrong. They did what your program allows. But if I could add an 8th resolution, I would say make it to where you want to make sure if someone signs up as a distributor, it is assumed that they want to build a business to a certain degree. And so I want to understand that as well. But yeah, I think it's funny. You will see as you look at that, what we don't want to do is say, oh, great, let's get people to become distributors so they buy more product. That's not the reason you want someone to be a distributor. And if that is happening for you, there's 2 things happening. One, you don't have a strong enough customer program in place, right? So in other words, they're saying, well, your distributor program is the best. And you're also not positioning your distributor program, what I would say properly or appropriately.
Yep. And as you were explaining that, good comment came across the chat too, as you're tracking that distributor purchases and how that relates to your retention number across corporate too. So
yeah, exactly.
It's a very valid point. And then the other one that came out of the data resolution that you were talking about, you talked about going through that and getting those data elements that we should be looking at from the Fast Start program. what it says, how do I tell if the Fast Start program's not working correctly, right? So what in those data elements that you're telling me to take a look at is going to give me those indicators that something is amiss?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I would do is, people might have heard me say this before, but I think if you really want to dumb down what a successful direct selling company looks like, it's this. Everyone is doing one of three things related to your Fast Start program. They're either going for Fast Start, they're helping someone go for Fast Start, or they're helping someone help someone go for Fast Start. Now, here's what I mean by that. If I'm a new distributor, I'm going for Fast Start, right? I'm in my first 90 days. If I sponsored that new distributor, I'm helping them go for Fast Start. And if I'm that sponsor's upline leader, I'm helping them help someone go for Fast Start. And what I have seen, and I bet many of you have seen this as well, yeah, you have a comp plan, but your Fast Start, again, everything lives and breathes off of the success of those new distributors coming in and the customers that come with them. And so if you can simplify it to where, great, we've got people coming in, they know how to hit Fast Start. It helps me figure out how to be a great sponsor, right? That's my job in that situation. And for leaders, I am investing in these up and coming sponsors because they are showing signs of possibly being even bigger leaders. And so you can kind of do that. So I would start there. The other thing, and without going too far, starting a baseline, and I don't say this as a rule. Again, I got this from my mentor, Alan, and you see a lot of flexibility here, but I would look at your Fast Start. Let's just say you have a 3-tiered Fast Start. Okay. You might not, but so apply this however it makes sense for you. But step one, I think generally you want to try to see if 50% of your new distributors can hit that at a minimum. If it's more than that, that's okay. If it's less than that, you might want to take a look at it. Second tier, I would say 25%. Third tier, I would say 10%. Now, again, those aren't hard and fast numbers. I think it's just a guide. But really what you're trying to do, especially that first tier, you are trying to overcome in their mind, did I make a good decision? And does this thing work? Okay. So the faster they can have their first order placed, the faster a customer will place their first order with them, the faster you overcome that. And once you overcome that, then they are open to whatever else it is you're talking about. Until then, they're wondering if this actually will work for them. They wonder either, does it work at all? Or they're like, I've seen it work for others, but it won't work for me. So you need to prove them wrong. Okay. So I find a lot of times that first step that our companies have is too difficult and it doesn't solve that problem. Because if someone, and this is where looking at that data will show you, hey, what's reasonable? And if you've got your first tier set up that only 30% of your first people get it, what you're really doing is telling 70% of your people you're a failure. Whereas maybe they're actually, if they just did a little bit more, it would be a great success for them and more importantly for your company.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes I think we take a look at some of the low bars and think it's ridiculously simple, but it's like exactly what you said. If we've got somebody brand new coming through the door, if all of a sudden they felt like they've accomplished something or have been successful, how much more likely are they to stay with the business?
Yeah.
Well, Brett, thank you again so much for sharing with us today. I always love to listen to you talk. You make the business seem so common sense and doable out there, right? Some people get so involved and so down in the weeds with things that it's daunting. I really, really appreciate all of your experience, all that you've been able to share across your customer base with us today. So thanks again for being with us. Everybody, thanks for attending today. And we know how precious your time is. As I said, we will circle back with you and give you a copy of the recording of today's presentation. And I look forward to upcoming presentations and being able to interact with you in between. Thanks again, Brett. Have a great afternoon, sir.
Thank you, Rich. Thank y'all.